y'all, welcome back to the Creeping Fig Cottage Kitchen. As promised, we are whipping up an egg and bean salad. For some of you, that might sound like a strange combination, and it is exactly that reason that we are making this episode. This was the recipe that I came across that I thought, wow, that sounds strange and unfamiliar. But that doesn't mean it's not delicious, and I was super curious. So we decided to start cooking up some vintage recipes and see how they taste. Egg and bean salad being one of those. So let's give it a taste and maybe we'll find that it deserves a place back on the modern table. Let's whip up this salad. We are gonna start with a 16-ounce can of drained barbecue beans. I imagine you could use any kind of baked bean you want, but the recipe called for barbecue, so we just chose a plain bean. Into the bowl it goes. Make sure they're pretty well drained because we're going to make a sauce for them. Now, as the recipe calls, we are going to add egg. This is 6 hard-boiled eggs, coarsely chopped. I imagine if you want them chopped smaller, you could go ahead and do that, but I am trying to stick as close to the recipe as possible. So 6 coarsely chopped hard-boiled eggs into the bowl with our beans. So far, so good. Now we're going to add roughly 1/4 cup of minced onion. I've used a Vidalia onion, and I have tried to cut it pretty small because my family does not necessarily like to eat raw onions, so the smaller the better. There you have it, folks. This is essentially the makings of our salad. Now we are going to whip up the dressing. So let's give this a stir. It looks interesting, to say the very least. Let's make a dressing. The recipe calls for a heaping tablespoon of salad dressing. I had to go and find this because we don't usually have this in our home. You can substitute for mayonnaise, but salad dressing felt more authentic. So let's stick a heaping tablespoon of salad dressing right in here. Let's make sure. It actually doesn't seem like a lot of dressing to me, but maybe a little bit goes a long way. There is our salad dressing. Now we're gonna add a heaping teaspoon of mustard. It says prepared mustard. Again, I imagine you could use Dijon, you could use a honey mustard. I'm choosing to go classic yellow. So let's get a teaspoon of mustard working. Now I'm going to add about 1/4 teaspoon of salt and a dash of pepper. Let's get this stirred up. And we're gonna get it into our beans and eggs. All right. Here we go. Into the beans and eggs. Well, let's get this tossed. It definitely is a look. Did you grow up eating this? Have you ever had it? Please let us know in the comments. I would love to know if this is something you have experienced. Now my favorite part. This recipe calls for the salad to be plated a certain way. It calls for a lettuce-lined bowl. Now we usually put a lot of heart and soul and effort into the food that we make, so why not present it with a little panache? I'm using iceberg. I assume you could use butter lettuce or whatever lettuce appeals to you. Here we go. Into our lettuce-lined bowl, which definitely gives it a little more class, I imagine. Okay. but not least, we are going to place on top about 3 strips of bacon, chopped. There it is. For your enjoyment, egg and bean salad. We're gonna plate this up for the Mayhew boys and have them give it a taste. You like it? Magnus, on a scale of 1 to 10?
5, 6.
It's not terrible.
If it was on the table, would you eat it?
Probably not.